2014, we have seen many riots from Black Lives Matter, BLM, an ironic name for an organization that fails to address the largest problems affecting the Black community, namely fatherless children, high rates of crime committed by Black Americans, and poor levels of educational attainment. So what do they focus on then? They focus on Black people getting shot by cops. Now, that may sound like an important thing to tackle. However, the people that they riot over have been criminals and or failed to comply with the officer's commands. BLM argues that cops are unfairly targeting Black people because they are Black. If you listen to their rhetoric, you would think that when a cop gets up in the morning, they plan on how many people that they will kill that day. Simply put, BLM tells Black people they are victims and that cops and whitey are out to get them. Now let's take a look at crime stats from the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, from 2015, the most recent year for which data is currently available. We will look at statistics for Black Americans, white Americans, and Asian Americans in 4 categories of crime: overall crime, violent crime, property crime, and other crimes. Overall crime reflects all arrests during 2015. When we look at this data, we see that Asian American adults are arrested for crimes at a rate of 24% of the overall crime rate. White American adults are arrested at 94% of the crime rate, and Black American adults are arrested at 212% of the overall crime rate. When we look at children, we find that Asian American children are arrested at a rate of 16.9% of the 2015 crime rate. White American children are arrested at 89.5% of the crime rate, while Black American children are arrested at a rate of 225.1% of the crime rate. Finally, when you look at the overall rates for Asian Americans, white Americans, and Black Americans, you'll find that the rates are 23.8%, 95.1%, and 209.1% of the crime rate. Next, we'll look at violent crime rates. Violent crime consists of murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Given the seriousness of these crimes and their nature, these crimes have an increased risk of turning into violent confrontations with police. The overall violent crime rate, the rate calculated from taking all 4 violent crimes together, is like what we see in the overall national crime rate. Once again, Black adults and children have the highest rate across the races. The overall violent crime rate, the rate calculated from taking all 4 violent crimes together, is like what we see in the overall national crime rate. Once again, Black adults and children have the highest rate across the races. Black adults having a rate of 284.12% of the national rate, Black children having a rate of 359.32% of the national rate, and the overall violent crime rate for Black Americans is 287.23%. Conversely, Asian Americans are arrested at rates significantly below the average crime rate at 29.56%, 14.99%, and 27.42% for adults, children, and overall, respectively. White American adults are slightly below the average at 82.34%. White American children are significantly below the average at 69.36%, while the overall rate for white Americans reflects the rate for white American adults at a rate of 82.19% of the national rate. If we look at the various components, we see that Black Americans are arrested for murder at a rate of over 400% of the national rate at all levels. Adults, 412.3%, children, 425.2%, and overall at 403.5%. When you look at the raw percentage of murder arrests made, which itself is typically a meaningless statistic due to the difference in population size, the picture is even more bleak. When you look at the population size, there are roughly 16.4% as many Black adults as there are white adults, 30.1 million versus 185 million, 20.9% as many Black children as there are white children, 10.4 million versus 50 million, and overall the Black population is only 17.3% of the white population, 40.7 million versus 235 million. Yet, in terms of murder, Black Americans committed a higher raw percentage of murders than white Americans. In all 3 cases, adult 50.4%, children 60.1%, and the overall 51.1%, Black Americans committed over 50% of all murders. These figures are startling given the overall small percentage of the population that Black Americans make up. Looking at rape, we see that Black American adults are arrested for rape at a rate of 227%, the national rate. Black American children are arrested at a rate of 217.7%, the national rate. And overall, Black Americans are arrested at a rate of 223.1%, the national rate. When we look at robbery, we see that Black American adults are arrested at 256% of the national rate, children 293.4% of the national rate, and overall Black Americans are arrested at 253.3% of the national rate. As a comparison, white Americans are arrested at 87.5% of the national rate, and Asians a mere 30% that national rate. Finally, when we look at the final category, aggravated assault, we see that adults are arrested at 407% of the national rate, children at 485.7% of the national rate, and overall Black Americans are arrested at 422.4% of the national rate. Next, we'll look at property crime rates. Here we see similar statistics. Asian Americans are arrested at rates significantly below the average rate at 23.3%, 22.82%, and 22.96% for adults, children, and overall respectively. White American adults are slightly below the average at 94.85%. White American children are below the average at 87.64%, and overall white Americans average a property crime rate of 94.04%. Black American adults have a rate of 213.67% of the property crime rate. Black American children are well above the property crime rate with a rate of 266.72%, and overall Black Americans have a property crime rate of 219.31% of the overall property crime rate. Finally, we will look at other crime rates. Here we see similar statistics. Asian Americans are arrested at rates significantly below the average crime rate at 23.6%, 15.2%, and 22.4% for adults, children, and overall. White American adults are slightly below the average at 94.7%, children 91.7%, and the overall rate for white Americans is 95.9%. Black American adults have a rate of 208.1%, Black American children 201.3%, and overall Black Americans have an other crime rate of 202.7% of the overall other crime rate. As the data shows, Black Americans are arrested at the highest rate of the three main racial groups: Asian Americans, white Americans, and Black Americans. This high rate means that they have more interactions with law enforcement. Even more important, the rates of violent crimes are even more dangerous, as it is more likely that an encounter between a person being arrested for murder and the police will turn violent than a person being arrested for gambling. When you look at drug abuse and drunkenness, both crimes that indicate impaired judgment, you see that the drug abuse rate for adults is 224.01% of the national rate, and for children is 154% of the national rate. Drunkenness, you see rates of 117.17 for adults and only 64.92% for children. It is only fair to note that white children have a rate of 123.04% for drunkenness. Overall, in the crimes reported by the FBI in 2015, when normalized to account for a difference in population, Black Americans had the highest crime rate in every category when compared to white and Asian Americans, with the following exceptions. Black children and overall black crime rate in relation to liquor laws, white Americans had the highest rate. Black children in relation to drunkenness, again, white American children had the highest rate. Black adults, children, and overall in relation to DUI, white Americans had the highest rate in all cases. Yet, when someone with a criminal history is killed during an arrest because they didn't comply with instructions, reached into a vehicle where the cop couldn't see them, moved toward the officer in a threatening manner, or any other reason, Black Lives Matter riots. They paint the person as a poor innocent victim who didn't do anything wrong. Another innocent victim of the racist police who are out to get black people because they are all white supremacists. One important question that we need to ask ourselves is, what is the cause of high crime rate amongst Black Americans? Why are they committing crimes at a rate so much higher than white and Asian Americans? We'll now look at some data from two other critical areas of society and the environment of individuals: educational attainment levels and family life. When we see such huge differences in crime rate, we must ask ourselves, what is the cause of such disparity? Why is crime so much higher in the black community than amongst whites and Asians? I forget the exact quote, but the Dalai Lama once said something to the effect that when one wants to learn, the best option is to go back to the source itself. The reason I bring that up is to understand the high levels of crime in the black community. A good place to start is the family. A stable family unit is the most fundamental aspect of developing into a well-adjusted human being. During the earliest stages of development, a child learns how to bond with other human beings and begins to establish its sense of self. It is important for a child to have the love and affection of its parents to help it grow into a well-adjusted human. When a child lacks one of these parents, it has a negative effect on its development. When we look at the family composition amongst the races, we see that Asians have the highest rate of families with two parents present, 88.41% married and 3.89% living together, for a total of 92.3%. White Americans come in second with 75.68% married and 6.94% living together, for a total of 82.62%. And black Americans have the lowest rate, 35.72% married, 8.26% living together, for a total of 43.98%. This means that 56.02% of black children are raised in households without a father. 56.02% of black children come from single mother homes. Over half of black children are raised in homes where the only available caregiver, the mother, is rarely home to spend time with the child and to help it develop properly, since she will need to work multiple jobs to try and make ends meet. This means the child is left in the care of neighbors, is left alone, or with teenage babysitters. These are the people who wind up raising the child. This is who will teach the child values, but this isn't even the end of the problems. Another major contributing factor to crime is the lack of education. People who lack a decent education are limited in their options in life when it comes to employment. While there was a time when a high school diploma could get you a decent job, those days are long gone. Regardless of your opinion on modern higher education, it is necessary to have a chance at a decent life, unless you have the aptitude for vocational trades such as electrician, plumber, etc. So let's take a look at the maximum educational attainment levels for Asians, whites, and blacks, first at the overall race level, then at genders separately. When you look at the chart, you notice that white Americans have the lowest rate of adults 25 and over who are lacking at least a high school diploma or an equivalent, coming in slightly below the national rate. Asians come in second, a little above the national rate, and black Americans have the highest rate of adults without a high school diploma, a rate that is nearly 5% above the national rate, a rate of 15.26%. Over 15% of black adults do not have a high school diploma. When you move forward to those with a high school diploma or equivalent, you once again see that black American adults have the highest rate, 31.52%, roughly 4% above the national average. White Americans are in the middle with a rate of 27.85%, just above the national rate of 27.62%, while only 15.48% of Asians are limited to a high school level education. When you turn to higher education, Asians have the highest rate of adults with maximum educational attainment of bachelor degrees, 29.99%, and graduate level degrees, 22.32%. White Americans have rates of 19.88% and 12.01%, both approximately the national rate for bachelor's and graduate degrees respectively. Black Americans have the lowest rates, 12.77% for bachelor's and 7.46% for graduates, both rates well below the national rates of 19.49% for bachelor's degrees and 11.98% for graduate degrees. This translates to black American adults having rates of 130% and 114% of the national rate in terms of lacking a high school diploma and having a maximum attainment level of high school, while only having rates of 65% and 62% of the national rate in terms of bachelor's and graduate degrees. If you look at Asians as a comparison, they obtain bachelor's degrees at 186% or graduate degrees 153% of the national rate. When you look at the rates across genders, you see that black men have a higher rate of a maximum educational attainment of high school or equivalent than women. Black women have a higher rate of obtaining a bachelor's degree or graduate degree than their male counterparts, with a combined rate of 22.4% versus 17.6%. It's interesting to note that 43.09% of black women over 25 years of age have a maximum educational attainment rate of high school or equivalent, while at the same time 56.02% of black children are raised by a single mother. It is important to also consider crimes committed that directly affect family life. In this case, drug abuse, drunkenness, and crimes against family and children. The FBI defines offenses against family and children as unlawful, nonviolent acts by a family member or legal guardian that threaten the physical, mental, or economic well-being or morals of another family member and that are not classifiable as other offenses such as assault or sex offenses. Attempts are included. By their very nature, these three crimes undermine the safety and stability of the family and children. It exposes them to a toxic environment, leads to increased risks of abuse, neglect, and provide a bad example for growing children. What BLM does not seem to realize is that their actions are going to lead to a rise in the very thing they rage against. When you march up and down streets chanting you want dead cops, when you celebrate a cop getting murdered in the line of duty, when you constantly riot, demand that white people give you everything for free, and preach that all white people are racist, you are going to create the racism you are supposedly trying to stop. So, not only is BLM not doing anything productive, their actions are outright harmful to the black community. You will cause more cops to shoot black people out of fear for their lives. If you know a demographic is the most violent along with the high levels of drug and alcohol abuse, you are going to be more likely to see even slightly questionable actions as aggressive and threatening. Now you need to consider the anti-cop hate rhetoric that BLM and SJWs preach, thus causing the police to be even more on edge. Finally, you must consider that the anti-white crime rate, where black people are the offender, is 159.5% the rate of anti-black crime rate, where white people are the offender. So when a white cop approaches a black suspect, they have the additional factor to weigh into their calculations. When you look at everything together, you see that organizations like Black Lives Matter need to focus on rebuilding the black family if they want to improve and save black lives. The few people a year who are shot by cops is nothing compared to the collapse of the community. When you have a group that has unstable home lives, absent fathers, parents who use drugs and or are drunks, and low educational attainment, you have a recipe for a large criminal element. Large numbers of black households lack this. You must ask how much overlap between the 56% of single mothers and 43% of black women who have no more than a high school diploma there is. Children who lack a decent education are locked into low-paying jobs, which causes them to struggle to survive. This can lead to people turning to crime either out of anger and resentment or out of desperation. Given that mindset, is it any surprise to see such high crime rates? It is a stable family that stands by you, encourages and helps you with your education, and sets good examples that is the cornerstone of the healthy development of a child. This is what they need to focus on if they really care about black lives, not a few thugs getting killed by cops for breaking the law and not following instructions. If the black family is rebuilt, we would see a drop in the crime rates across the board as children would be raised with good, solid role models and support. Of course, Black Lives Matter and SJWs will dismiss this entire argument with two words: white privilege. Rather than trying to address the collapse of their own community, they will project the fault onto other people. They will blame white people for their problems rather than fixing them. I guess it's easier to blame other people than admit the problem is your own community.